2024, surprisingly, turned out to be a fairly solid year for horror films. I mean, we saw films like Terrifier 3 and The Substance, as well as Robert Eggers' Nosferatu and Heretic starring Hugh Grant, as well as what some people consider this to be a 2023 film, but it was released in festivals in 2023, but the 2024 it did have a theatrical run, which Strange Darling, which I thought was a fairly solid horror. I guess kind of horror, but a more psychological thriller sort of thing. But here we're going to talk about another really good horror film from 2024, and that is none other than Smile 2, which is a direct sequel to the 2022 horror film Smile. Now, the general consensus seems to be that most people think that Smile 2 is a vast improvement over Smile 1. So I'm going to talk about that and what my opinion is of that in this video. I'm also eventually going to rate this film on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. And we're going to do a little bit of a recap. For this film, I don't often do it, but I'm probably going to talk about the ending because I got some stuff to say about the end. So is Smile 2 a plot point by plot point remake of Smile 1 with a little bit higher budget, or does this film have an identity of its own? We're going to talk about that in this video, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. So this film had a budget of $28 million compared to that's a production budget, not advertising budget. The first film had a budget of $17 million. So it had a bigger budget, and we do see that on screen here. Now, as far as the box office numbers, Smile 2 was still ringing in fairly impressive with $138 million, but not as good as Smile 1, which came in at $217 million. But it's still pretty solid in comparison to its budget. It did pretty good, and I do believe they're making a third one. It's going to turn into a Smile franchise, especially seeing what happens at the end of this one. This is directed by the same person, Parker Finn, who directed the first one. And really, these are the only two features he's directed so far. He's had some other offers. He's got some new stuff coming up in the near future. I'm going to go over a little bit what happens in Smile, and it's about a psychologist or a therapist. A woman comes to her and is telling her about what's happening to her about the Smile thing. And so she had saw someone killed themselves in front of her, and after that happened, she started seeing visions of just people smiling at her everywhere she looked. So eventually, she comes to this therapist, who's the main character of the first one, and she kills herself in front of her. Right when they kill themselves, they seem like they die. They fall on the floor, whatever, and die like that. And then they come back up, big smile on their face, like this, and that's when they are the Smile monster. And then they kill themselves pretty as quickly as they can at that point. But in order to kill themselves, somebody has to see it, and that person that sees it kind of gets the Smile virus, which is, it lasts for most people it's 4 days. Some people go like at least 6. Now this has a similar theme, of course, to The Ring, and The Ring so far has had 3 movies done. Smile's already up at 2, and I can tell you that I think Smile 2 is better than Ring 2. It's not better than the first Ring, but it's probably better than the Ring 2. You know, I did recently watch the Ring 2, and I did have a little bit of I had a better take on it this time than the first time I saw it. It's not as bad or as slow as what I remembered it, but some of these sequels with this sort of concept are kind of tough because you've got this concept established. Very well done in the first one, by the way, with the protagonist played by Sosie Bacon, and she goes through this whole rigmarole. And it's very psychological, very dark, and just things escalate for her, and it becomes more and more severe as the film goes on. Most people don't believe her, and sure, they just think she's kind of going crazy. She's kind of had some psychological issues, or her mom had some psychological issues in the past, so they don't believe her, except for her ex-boyfriend, played by Kyle Gallner, who also starred in Strange Darling. But he's a cop, and he starts to see things. He starts to do an investigation, and they follow the trail of previous people who have had this affliction. They were able to kind of figure out what they need to do. Only one person's been able to get around it, and what he did was he killed himself in front of somebody. No, he killed not himself, but killing yourself would probably work, more than likely. But he killed like another person gruesomely in front of somebody else, and then the person who saw that, it passed on to that person, and it skipped that particular person. So Kyle Gallner, who plays the police in this, he ends up getting the Smile virus at the end of the first one, and it starts out with his character briefly at the beginning of it, And so it kind of follows him, and he tries to do this. He goes to a drug dealer's house and he kills one of the drug dealers in front of this other drug dealer. Then that one drug dealer pulls out a gun and they end up shooting at each other, and the drug dealer dies. So now he doesn't have any witnesses, and he killed somebody for no reason. But then it turns out there is another guy in there who was just there, a younger guy who was just there for the drug deal. I mean, he's just there to buy some drugs, but he saw, and now he's affected with the virus. Now Kyle Gallner's character Joel meets his demise fairly early in the film. After the shootout, he tries to run away, and a bunch of other drug dealers show up, and he gets ran over by a car. And it's quite gruesome, and it's just he kills him so hard, his legs on the ground, that there's no way that this character is going to come back. And I don't know why. I don't like it that they killed his character. It would have been a cool character to keep around for the franchise, but I guess they're not really concerned with keeping the hero characters around. They just want the monster. But maybe they just want to catch people's attention with a really gruesome death right off the bat, and they unfortunately had to kill off the Joel character, which I think would have been nice to keep him around, but it's got to move on. And really the focus, the person who eventually gets this, who's the main character of this film, and her name's Sky Riley, and she's kind of a pop singer like Britney Spears or something to that nature, and she's been having a lot of trouble. She's had some alcohol, drug addictions in the past, and now she's clean, but she's in a really bad car wreck, and she's had to have some surgeries, and she's in a lot of pain. So in between, she's trying to do these dances, and she's in a lot of pain. So she needs some Vicodin to help with the pain. But then they won't prescribe her the Vicodin because of her drug addictions. So she has to go to this drug dealer to try to get some, and that's how she ends up getting it. And like in the first film, it kind of does follow the plot points of the first film, and I don't know if there's really a way around that, because it basically is this person becomes affected, this other guy kills himself in front of her, just like the girl kills herself in front of the main character of the first film, and then she kind of goes through the motions of not believing she's got it, and it escalating, people around her not believing her. But it's more like her not believing in herself. But in a way, it does have an identity of its own in a way, because really the setting is different, because you're following like a more interesting person. Naomi Scott plays the character Sky Riley, but it's just a different environment. I mean, you do have a female lead again, but at the same time, it's a little bit of a different type of character, and this character is quite flawed. And there's something to do with this car accident. It shows in flashback her boyfriend, who was driving the car, is played by Ray Nicholson, who's Jack Nicholson's son, and there's actually a scene where he shows him smiling here. It shows it on the back here. He looks like kind of like Jack Nicholson in that scene, but he was driving the car when they had the wreck, and she was involved with the wreck. It was mostly her fault when they had a wreck, but they were having a fight in the car, but this is kind of revealed later in the film, and it's a fairly devastating scene to watch, but it makes you think differently about the character and her what's going on with her. But at the same time, it's different than the first one just because you're in a different environment, but it is following the same motions. Now, as it was happening, I was thinking to myself, is this going to be interesting? Because we already know this, and this. And by the way, it is quite frightening what happens to these characters as they start to see things, and things start to unravel all around them. And the characters don't know after a while, they don't know what reality is, and they can't tell the difference between reality and fiction, or what this monster's making them see. So in the audience, as an audience, sometimes the same thing happens to you. You don't know what is real and what isn't. Though I have a pretty good idea in this film what is real and what isn't, and that's kind of what happens at the end. But I'm going to talk about here before we get off the video. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the release real quick. This did come with a very nice slipcover. For some reason they put a sticker on it about some behind the scenes stuff, but I was going to leave the sticker on there. I don't know why they would put it on the slipcover. We got this Rotten Tomato thing here, not the best. It says, now down here it says, one of the best horror sequels ever made. Now, this is a good sequel, but I don't know if I would go that far into saying that. But it's not that it's not well done. Here's the inside of it. Similar to the outside without the Rotten Tomatoes nonsense, just white on the inside. And you have a Blu-ray This is the 4K, and you also, here's some, you can save 20% on some merchandising here. And there's a Blu-ray in here as well. As far as it comparison to the first one and people thinking that it's better, I was surprised by watching the first one. I was kind of, I just watched it for the first time a week or two ago. And it was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. This one does have a higher budget. The production design is better because because of what they're doing with the other production design. The other one was fine. It worked for the movie, but there is a bigger production design because they're doing these music videos that the main character Naomi Scott is or her name's Sky Riley. She's doing the music videos, but Naomi Scott. She has been in some stuff too. She was in the Power Rangers 2017 film, as well as she played Jasmine in the Disney live action version of Aladdin, and also in one of the angels in the Charlie Angels movie, but didn't do very good. But I really like her performance here. I like Sosie Bacon in the first one too, but she does it differently, and because she's a different type of character. She is like a pop singer, and she's believable when she's dancing. I believe it. But there's a lot of there's some different scares in this. There's a lot of jump scares. Now there is a guy played by Peter Jacobson. I think I'm pronouncing him right. I recognized him from the show House. He was one of the doctors that came in later on House's team. But he's the brother of someone else who was affected by the Smile entity, and he's texted her throughout the film, and then she eventually meets up with him when she gets further into it, and she meets up with him, and he tells her what's going on. Now he has an idea about how to fix it that may or may not work, but I think it probably will work if they. Now I'm going to go ahead and this is going to go into the spoiler part of the end. So, so his idea is to freeze her and basically stop her heart, kill her briefly, and then bring her back. And he thinks about doing that, the Smile monster entity, whatever you want to call it, will detach itself from her. And he meets with her, and she's not really ready to do this yet. And so she leaves in a panic, really thinking that he might just be out of his mind, crazy. And she goes back to her apartment, and that's when there's like a whole bunch of different people, like Smile, like they're all not really there. She's seeing them. It's the entity, and they're all around, big smiles on their faces, and they surround her. And one of them takes his fist and shoves it into her throat, down her mouth, and then there's like she wakes up the next day in a facility, like a healthcare facility, and then from there. Which it goes on for a good like 20 or 30 minutes after that. This movie is, by the way, is 2 hours and 7 minutes. Now, some of these films, they do seem to be running a little longer than what you would think a traditional horror film would be. But I think the length works here. It does have a lot of interesting stuff. Now, but there is a good chunk of this film from when that fist goes into her mouth until almost the end of the film that this is all not really happening. It's the Smile creatures making her think that this is happening. Meanwhile, the Smile creature's using her body. And now this is not said explicitly in the movie, but here's what's happening. The Smile monster has taken over her body and is basically going through her motions to get her to get out on stage. Because she's a pop singer who's going to do this concert and wants to get her out on stage and kill her on stage. There is a part in the first film in which you can see that this does kind of happen. It doesn't happen but once, I think, in the first film. There's a scene where the main character goes to a birthday party, and she's got a present for the little kid there. When he opens it up, it's her cat. The cat has been killed. So the Smile entity must have taken over her body, killed the cat, wrapped it up in the present. So that way, when she goes there with it, Smile monster can take over people. It takes Sky over for like a long period of time. I would think at least a day or two in time in the film. While it's like she's thinking that she's solving the problem, and she's lots of crazy things happen, like her mom gets killed and things like that. But all that none of that really happens because her mom's still alive at the end. Now, when it comes back out and she actually comes back into reality, she's out on the stage in front of all these people in this dress. Earlier in the film, she said she wasn't going to wear it, but she's like, why am I wearing this dress? And this is the big spoiler, of course. The same thing happens to her that happens to the character in the first one. It ends up coming out. The monster comes out, and there's some kind of sketchy computer animation here. So maybe a little bit much. Like her stomach opens up and then it comes out. And I think there's two of her there. And then the monster, which is apparently practical. I thought it was CGI, but a friend of mine was telling me it actually is practical and showed me a video on it. But the monster looks cool, and it's a big monster, and it comes out, and then it comes over her, and then rips open her mouth, which is all CGI, goes down her throat, and then it comes back out, and she stands up with a big smile on her face, because then at that point it's got her, and then she kills herself with a microphone. And then that everybody watching it, I guess, in the audience, I don't know if everybody, but it's on the audience and people watching it on TV, I think. There's a potential for a lot of people to be infected, which is almost like when you watch the trailer for the first Smile, that was kind of what I thought was going on. Like people are, like everywhere were being infected by like this Smile virus. And that seems to be what happened at the end of this one, opening up the next film to maybe be a lot different in its execution. Maybe having a lot more people in it, not a lot more people like who were becoming more of a virus or more of a widespread problem for the characters. Again, they don't leave a lot of like hero characters left. Peter Jacobson's character is still around, and and I think that really when he met with her in the diner and told her what his plan was, I think the Smile monster panicked, and he's like, this could work, and that's why he came in there and shoved his hand down her throat, because that way he could control her, because he was really worried about what that plan was, and it could have stopped it. I think I'm pretty sure that's what could have happened. Now I'm going to go ahead and rate the film. Well, first off, I'm just going to say this is a 4K transfer. It looked fantastic as far as the way it's shot and lit. It's mostly lit naturally, like you have some natural skin tones throughout, and the textures on everything looks terrific here, and the blacks of course are very, very deep. But I do like the way it's shot. I do like the way, unlike sometimes in, say, even the first one had a little bit of color grading, but like the original Ring had that green, color grading over it, which they did the second one. A different director did it, and he took away that and went back with the natural colors, which I think works better for most of the movie. Even though this does have some, depending on the scene, there is some scenes that have some oddness on purpose to them with the color grading, but generally the flesh tones look appropriate, and the 4K transfer looks terrific. Now, as far as the rating of the film, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give this. I'm going to give it a 3.5 stars. I really think this is a very solid film. Now, it is gruesome in some parts. Now, I didn't see this in the theater, so I can't really compare what it was like to see it on the big screen. But I will say, in watching it on the TV I watched it on in the house, it is a pretty effective film. Both of this and the first one are psychological, supernatural horror films, and they are very. It can be very scary. And I think this sort of thing can give people some pretty bad nightmares after you're watching it, if you start thinking about like the delusions of the stuff that they see. I think the first one maybe even more so. This one does have a little bit of a brighter light to it, with all the pop singer stuff going on in her entourage. I mean, it is more of a lighter in some areas, and it does, as far as it. I don't know. I like both of them. Maybe this one is probably better, but you got to appreciate the first one because it's the one that started it all, and it kind of, without that one, you wouldn't have this one. I do like the beginning with the cop returning and what he has to go through. That part's really awesome. But this film, I guess, in general, does kind of probably keeps your attention better throughout it, even when it gets into the part where. That's what I was worried about with this, her going through the same thing again that the first character went through. But they keep it very interesting, and they keep it moving, and even though you kind of know where it's going, and it ends up landing it kind of in the same place, just a little bigger at the end. But I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts on it, if you've seen it, and if you haven't done so already, if you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.